Welcome to the What You Don't Know podcast, brought to you by the Know Like Trust Report, a simple, actionable survey that asks the most important questions. I'm Teresa Nichols, and I'm honored to have our guest today, Erica Collins, who has her own company. It's called Harmony Healing Arts. And Erica was a dancer, and she also is a dance instructor. So I thought it'd be great to have her on today to talk about how important feedback is in those areas. So Erica, tell us a bit about basically what you're doing now and about your career.
Hey, Terry. I'm so excited to be here, just talking about know, like, trust and all of the ways that feedback can really help or hinder us, depending on what we've got going internally and externally. So I'm a
Sure.
retired professional dancer who still teaches children and adults dance. I'm also a yogi. I teach yoga, gyrotonic, Pilates. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist and a Reiki master teacher. So it's kind of interesting wearing many different hats to see how feedback is similar and yet different in different scenarios with people of different walks of life, different ages. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in and let's talk all things feedback.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to dance then. So you said you were a professional dancer. Where did you dance?
So I toured around the country, mostly
Wow.
danced professionally in the Ohio area. I'm from Ohio. My business is in Ohio. And I had to learn at a young age when you're dancing. There's a point when you're a small child that being a dance teacher, you want to really give children positive feedback to keep them moving, to get them to risk doing larger movements. There's kind of a joke in dance that if you're a dancer and you mess up, then you should be messing up big because you should be dancing big and you should never
Yeah.
mess up small. You should just give it your all. And so we're kind of taught that at a young age, to come out the gate, give it your best. And if you're jumping or leaping across the floor and you really flub it up, at least you gave it your best.
Wow.
And when we're, yeah, right? I
That's
feel
really
like it's a gift that we get in dance class that the rest of the world kind of has to learn in harder ways.
Yeah.
But to know that when you do something across the floor, in essence, and let me just kind of take it back a step. When I started teaching dance, I was 12 years old. That's when you start teaching at a pretty young age. And at that time in our social economic development, people were, we didn't have all of this with our phones and our devices.
Mm-hmm.
So kids were more, they were less inhibited, they were more active. Like when I was a kid, we would do cartwheels and back handsprings in the grass. And kids were more apt to do bigger physical movement. Then, as we get into the computer, the texting, the gaming era, that kind of changed where kids were more sedentary and their hand-eye coordination was really great, but their body mechanics, their what we call spatial awareness, those were all things that they were really lacking. And I had to really change how I taught children because it used to be in dance being an art that you're going to do that turn or that jump hundreds, if not thousands of times wrong until you can do it right or at an elevated level.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and when you've got kids that have instant gratification through their phones or their games, I had to really learn how to literally razzle dazzle my kids. And normally,
Okay.
as a performer, you're trying to perform for the audience, but as a teacher, I had to learn do I keep their attention span because they're learning something that they're not going to feel proficient at quickly. That if I'm going to be an honest teacher and giving them honest feedback of like, well, that was really nice, Susie, but next time point your toes. Well, that was really nice, but next time can you jump higher? Well, that was
Yeah.
really nice, but now can you make the legs wider? So as you're developing into that, if we're not careful in today's day and age, the kids just quit. If you make it too hard, they quit and say, oh, I can't do that. And if you make it too easy so that they don't quit because they're not handling feedback, it's been really interesting.
Wow.
So
That's
finding
amazing.
this balance of giving enough positive reinforcement. And I used to train elephants and lions and tigers. We didn't even talk about that. So
Yeah.
that's a whole nother aspect of operant conditioning and using positive and negative reinforcement that I would put with my children. Sometimes I'd have some of my parents feel a little awkward saying, well, why are you training my kid like you're training an elephant? I'm like, operant conditioning And positive and negative reinforcement are the same whether you're human or you're an animal. It
Yeah.
just gives us a different way of viewing it and kind of stepping out of the ego and looking at what can I do to change those thoughts, feelings, behaviors, or that technique. Say in
Wow.
dance class or at a job, it might be, learning to speak a certain way to function in that culture at the job. What can you do to retain clientele? How do you build rapport? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of ways we share feedback can help us also build rapport with the students, with the families, and then eventually in the workforce too.
We've been talking a couple, well, like, I had another interview and we talked about the word rapport, and that is an amazing word. I definitely need to use that more because I think it's a great word. And the other thing that you said that is really, really cool that I hadn't really thought about for no like trust is this idea of the sandwich. It's like positive, negative, positive, and tell them something they're doing great, and then tell them what they can improve, and then end it with, but you're doing great, and I've been doing that for a while. I really appreciate that approach.
Yeah.
And I think even in a no like trust report, I might put that in my comments that way because I talk that way, and I think
Yeah.
that people really like that. But that's really cool that you had mentioned that, and that you do that with your kids, with your students. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think when you teach kids, like when I was young, they would always say you have to have thicker skin. You've got to have thick skin when you dance. You have to have thick skin when you perform. Don't take it personal. And it's
Yeah.
hard. Like, for
Yeah.
example, if you're a dancer, you're basically naked to the world. You're literally wearing a leotard and tights. Your whole body is exposed. Your
Yeah.
movement is exposed. There's really nowhere to hide on the dance floor. And so if you learn, for example, back when I used to audition for shows, some employers like Kings Island, we have Kings Island here in Ohio, or like if you've ever heard of, Disney. I mean,
Yeah.
Disney has pick of the litter. And those kind of really large organizations, they will tell you out the gate, you might be the best dancer, but we're specific. I mean, they get pick of the litter. We are specifically looking for, we've got a set series of dancers that we're bringing back from the season before. And if they're going to pair you male and female for, certain lifts and things, they're like, well, we know that we've got somebody that has this look, this height. So we need a blonde that's literally 5'5" and has green eyes. And then I need a brunette male that's this height with it. And because they have pick of the litter, like, yeah, you could wear contacts that are a different color. Yeah, we can put a wig on you. And sometimes in theater, we do things like that. But in those environments, they'll tell you out the gate, like, hey, you could be the best dancer here on the floor, but don't take it personally because we're hiring for, if they have a certain costume that you're wearing. Like you have to fit in that costume. Like
Mhm.
many years ago when I was a preteen, I got a gig as my dance teacher got us a gig being dancing chipmunks. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Alvin, Simon, and Theodore.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
really know your chipmunks, Terry, you know that one of them is shorter, and that's the one
Chubbier.
that I was.
Oh, okay.
Because I had to fit in that costume. So they were like, we need, and it's like you didn't have to wear makeup for that gig because you're in a character costume.
Yeah.
But again, that was good feedback of knowing like we need this height. And so a few of my dancer friends and I, we went to a mall and we earned money being, just chipmunks giving hugs to everyone. And I got to be Alvin because he's the shortest. And it's just kind of interesting to play into really not taking it personally. And it's hard. We're all human. There are times that I have let my ego get activated and it's kind of maybe hurt my feelings here or there. But then I have to bring myself back to, not every gig is your gig. And not every client is your client. Not every employer is your employer. We have to find kind of these time and places where we're really aligned and we're in a place that's for us. And I
Yeah,
think No Like
that's
Trust is a great way to kind of gear us to that path.
yeah. I love what you're saying because I think everybody can take something away from this because there are certain industries that the feedback is much tougher. And you, like you said, you have to not take it personal, and you have to have a thick skin. And I think that if somebody were to listen to this and say, well, the feedback that I get isn't that me, and here I am like, no, I don't want your feedback, so to say, well, if
Yeah.
this person can deal with this and how hard this feedback was, then I'm okay with the feedback I'm getting, because it's not quite so rough, not quite so impersonal, so
Yeah.
that's really, really cool. I really appreciate that. It's really nice.
Yeah.
So talk about you as a teacher, from the perspective of maybe your parents or your kids. Did you ever get any feedback that was really beneficial? And here it's really funny too, and this happened to me. I don't know, maybe this didn't happen to you at all, but I have actually seen feedback that wasn't given to me personally, but I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, I see what I need to do better based on what this person did. So if you
Yeah.
any things that you remember where you got some really great feedback that helped you with your teaching or that helped you with your relationships.
Yeah, that's brilliant what you're saying, actually, because as a dancer, that's always the one-liner that we're trained with and that we teach with is if I'm giving, like, you've got 30 kids in ballet class, and probably most of them are all doing the same thing wrong or less than stellar. And it's a learning process and there's a learning curve. And so we always say, if I'm stopping class to give Billy Joe Bob or Susie Sunshine feedback, you need to listen to that and take that as though that feedback might be applicable to you. And it'll make
Right.
you a better dancer. And that
Yeah.
really has made me a better employee. It's made me a better business owner all through the years because when I see other people given feedback, I've always had that in the back of my mind as well, do I do that? Not always in an insecure way, like, well, do I do that too? But of like, well, I wonder if I can learn and grow from that. And I think it's kind of a dancer superpower maybe that we get if you dance competitively. And as far as like giving feedback to students and parents and families, I learned kind of through a process of trial and error. You have children that grow up and their dance career might be that they're just going to be a recreational dancer and they're going to dance, kindergarten or age 3 through high school. And then that's it. They're going to go to college and never pursue it again. And that's their dance career. So
Mhm.
that child, I will maybe give different corrections to because I know that their facility or the physics of their body and what they're doing in their body and their level of training might be different than a competitive dancer.
Okay.
And when I have a competitive dancer that is really wanting to go and work professionally in the field, then that critique changes. And then that's when I get to really tweak them on and now this is what I want to tell you that you might be judged against. These are the things that
Sure.
people are going to say. Because when you compete, I remember being a national and a regional and national competitive dancer. Some people really get freaked out of the judges that just sit there and stare at you and they're just so like stone faced. And for me, I got a kick out of that because I thought I'm going to just work that person like nobody's business. And I'm going to, if it was a smiley, happy dance, if it was an emo dance, and I'm just going to melt them all with my, whatever, my showmanship. And then sometimes at the end of a dance, they'll like, and then they'll smile. And then just to get that back, then I know, all right, I got in. So
Yeah.
feedback, even in the competitive world, is very different. And sometimes with the judges, now the judges' comments are all done digitally and live. They've got headsets so you can hear specifically during each dance where they're critiquing you for what. But back in the day, they had to write things down, when the dinosaurs ran the earth and people were doing dance competitions, and they would, you'd have to kind of guess where they were at in the music when they were giving you those corrections. But sometimes if you would have a live moment like that with the judge, you would be able to put what judge was with which comments, which is really cool. Now you can see
Okay.
it because it's all disclosed online, kind of similar to what we're doing now, where each judge is being filmed and monitored and
Wow.
all sent digitally. It's really cool how they do it. And then also, so we've got, the people that are just dabbling in dance. We've got the people that are dancing more competitively. But then we have what if your child has an issue? Maybe a behavioral issue in class, maybe a mental issue in class. So typically, I don't really announce it to the world, but it is true. And it's kind of something that I've said off and on over the years that I will almost always see dyslexia years before it's clinically seen in the school realm and years before the parent gets a diagnosis from the doctor because we're doing movement. And
Wow.
when I'm teaching left from right, when children are small and they come into dance, we're actually teaching them colors and shapes and where to move in the floor and, different directional places to move, high, low, up, down, waiting your turn, those kinds of things. But then as they get older, they're learning the left from the right. And if you have a child that really inverts their left and right movement, um, I remember one time I had a child and I struggled. I was never dyslexic, but I was left-handed. And I went to a private Catholic school, and the nuns did not like that because I was different. I was atypical. And for years, they would try to get me to write right-handed, and I just couldn't. I
Yeah.
ended up staying on my left hand. But I watched children that were forced to write right-handed, and then their whole life, like I actually have a family member of mine that they forced her to be right-handed. To this day, everyone thinks she's a ditz because she drops everything all the time. But is she really a ditz? Or did they just really change how her brain was wired to get things with her left hand and she's always so
Wow.
being really sensitive to that, this one child in particular, I was really trying to help her get the left from the right. And if you don't want to correct a child too much because it can give them a complex, and then if you have some children that they feed on that where they won't perform at an elevated level because they want your approval. So of course there are always boundaries and finding the middle path in all things. But
Sure.
I had the child went home to the parent and complained that Miss Erica was really calling out her name more so in class than some of the others. And it wasn't in a
Oh,
derogatory way. It was just this was a child that I had a feeling had dyslexia. And at the time, I was working for someone else at their studio, and I said, "Hey, I think this little girl has dyslexia. She's in her preteen years, which is a vulnerable time anyway, and that
yeah.
hasn't been caught yet." And I said, "Do you think we should tell her or not tell her to maybe have that checked because you're a dance teacher, you're not a doctor, I don't prescribe." But
Yeah.
again, if it's my child, because I've had years of experience teaching dance, I would value that opinion. Well, the mother came in very frustrated, very upset, and the first thing I said was, "I want to ask you a question. Is your child better at English than math?" And she was like, "Well, yeah, how did you know that?" And I said, "Does your child struggle with math?" And she's like, "Yeah, how did you know that?" And I said, "Well, I'm a dance teacher. And if children, typically, not always, but the brain is such a phenomenal organ that when kids are really great at jazz, I know that they're great in English class. And if they're really great at ballet, that pretty much tells me they're going to be great at ballet because of the way that the math kind of happens in the body through those two
Huh.
dynamics.
That's cool.
And if I've got a kid that's great at tap, that's very percussive, that's very kinesthetic, that's going to be a real hands-on child. That's probably the child that's going to want to sit and move when everyone else is being told to sit still. And it's interesting how I can tell this by just watching how my kids dance in class, where they have strengths and weaknesses in their schoolwork. And the mother was like, "Yes, how did you know that?" And then I thought, well, maybe since I've got this rapport with the mother that she's on board, I can say, "Look, I'm not a doctor and I don't prescribe, but has your child suffered with directions and left and right? Have you noticed that at home? Because I see it very conclusively in class, and I'm actually trying to help your child because it probably won't be until years later until there may be an official diagnosis. Have you had this checked out?"
Yeah.
And she said, "It's interesting that you say that because we're having issues with her teachers in class where she's struggling. We don't know how to help her." Sure enough, the mother actually took the child to the doctor and she did have dyslexia. And you don't know what you don't know. And once you
Mhm.
know what that is, then I mean, this is a brilliant kid. She's out, she's an adult now doing amazing things in the world.
Wow.
But if we wouldn't have caught that at an early age, and if mom wouldn't have been frustrated because daughter was frustrated, and it developed, I think, an even deeper rapport with this family of like,
Sure.
wow, you love my child enough to give an honest feedback now that I've called you in this meeting because I think at first that she was gunning for my job. Like, I think she needs to be fired because she's correcting my daughter.
Yeah,
But it was really out of love for that child that I wanted to see, is this just that the child never learns left from right, or is there really a deeper issue?
yeah,
So feedback, it has to be a sensitive thing, and taking the personal part out of it.
yeah.
It's
That's
challenging.
so amazing. I hope that the No Like Trust report can uncover those kinds of things for people because it's a way to allow somebody to say something and take out the emotion, take out the
Yeah.
personal part and just to say, hey, this, you might want to consider this. And
Yeah.
we don't always get that kind of feedback. So think about if she was not taking classes from you, she would have maybe not gotten that feedback and she would have been maybe very misunderstood for a while. So that's such a blessing that she was able to get that feedback from you early in her life so that she could work with it early in her life. So yeah, so that's really amazing that worked out like that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that story. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. And ironically, it's one of my dance families that we're still friends now. Like, they'll
Wow.
reach out on Facebook and we tag each other, and
Huh.
it's really a gift. I've
That's
got a
great.
few of those dance families, and it's really great. And then
Yeah.
I think, one other point to mention about feedback is then there has to come a happy medium, because there can be constructive criticism and then there can be vicious, abusive, critical feedback. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
dance world, Lord knows I've danced and worked with both. I think if you've been in a job long enough, working as an adult, you've had both,
Yeah.
and it's kind of learning to navigate through that. Like, for example, I had some certification that I was taking a while back, and I was, I'm an advanced practitioner of many things, and it was something to where they wanted you to speak a certain spiel, but I've been in this game of fitness now for 30 plus years. I mean, I'm 50 years old and I started working teaching dance at 12. So
Wow.
it might be madness, but that, I've been in the game a minute.
Yeah.
And so coming in, I was really, confident in myself, but wanting to learn their methodology. But they had a lot of really young girls coming in that this was their first introduction to this kind of fitness. And so it was very easy for them to memorize what they were saying. And I had more questions like, well, why are we doing what we're going, why we're doing it this way in this method? Because I wanted to learn, like, well, why is that? Because sometimes it's tomato, potato, potato. And if you don't know why you're doing things and the intention of doing things, then you're not really able to give your clients maybe as deep of work as one would hope. And it
Yeah.
was interesting because they really ripped me up. Like, I came in really confident, not cocky, but confident and open and curious. But when I went to teach that class, my verbiage was vastly different versus someone that was really green and only learning this material that could regurgitate exactly what they had said. And they were telling me, well, you don't teach it this way. You don't say these words. You don't say those words. And I was like, well, okay. I didn't at all take it personally. I thought, well, all right. Well, then as I kept going on these other online trainings and hearing all these other teachers, much of whom were much newer, they were saying all the exact same things that I was told not to say.
Yeah.
And I thought, and they didn't get one correction. So then I thought, my ego was like, well, Erica, I wonder, is that ageism? Is it that if you're too confident, that counts against you? And do you have to play the game of like, my name is Erica, my favorite color is clear. I'm just going to pretend and dumb myself down and be so submissive or subservient so that I have your approval so that I can get this certification for this course. And sometimes, right or wrong, that's how we have to kind of play the game. If you're in an environment where maybe the critiquing or the feedback isn't as consistent, so that you can survive and keep your mental health and wellness in a good place, and that you can find, all right, how do I, instead of just taking it on the negative and then holding that as a wound inside me that then keeps me from really learning what I need to learn to get that darn certificate and complete that course.
Mm-hmm.
I see so
Yeah.
many people, they just get stuck, in those kind of environments where it's like crushing to them, or then they're just really angry and it's this chip on their shoulder. And, life is hard enough. Like, we need to learn to let that go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in school getting my doctorate in public administration, and one of my instructors gave me some feedback that at first was very frustrating. And but one thing they said was really interesting was this study that you're going to do, it does not have to be rocket science. And they were just like, we want you to graduate. Keep it really simple. And so it helped me a lot with this idea, like you said, of just passing it, getting it, and moving on, and not, trying to save the world with this one report that I was doing. So yeah, so it ended up being really, really good feedback that at first I had to, just step back and listen to what they were saying. But I get you on that when you are on somebody else's, certificate or their protocol, it is a really good idea just to listen to what they're saying so you can get through it rather than trying to fight it and change it and fix it or whatever. So yeah, so it's really interesting. So it's been great. I There's been so many nuggets in this. I just love everything that you've said, so thank you so much for.
I'm just so honored. I'm so excited to see where this podcast grows for you. It's
Oh,
because
thank
you're
you.
amazing and I love everything you do. It's
Thank you.
the beginning of so much more.
Thank you for that. That's awesome.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you.